It was raining in a way that makes metal taste like old pennies. A volunteer on a muddy shoulder, gloves soaked, sleeves dark at the cuffs, lifted the lid of a roadside postbox that most of the county had forgotten. The lid protested with a long, wet creak. When the box opened, the smell hit. Paper gone soft at the edges, a faint must of earth and rain, and something else, years pressing down between envelopes. One letter, wedged at the bottom, bore a name that stopped appearing in records long ago. The hand on the envelope trembled, then steadied. If you were there, what would you do? Do you feel that? The moment expands. The story begins.
Find somewhere dark and quiet. Put your headphones on if you have them. This is Nature's Dread. I'm Sam Nang. Tonight, Postmark Hollow, the letters that found the woods. We will follow a volunteer from a wet verge to a small fluorescent-lit archives room. We'll kneel with letters and ask what to do when private words return to public places.
The volunteer, called him Mara, because names anchor us, was part of a county program clearing invasive brush at an old trailhead on a back road that saw less traffic than deer. The postbox itself was a relic, flaking paint, a faded municipal seal, and a chipped slot the size of a thumb. Locals had a dozen small reasons the box fell out of use: a new route, a removed mailbox at the nearby farm, a retired postmaster. It became a roadside artifact, a piece of infrastructure slowly absorbed by the shoulder of the land. The rain made everything smaller and older. Mara knows the rhythm of the road, the way headlights slice through fog, the way tractors arrive in the morning and leave at dusk. She went to work. She found letters.
She opened the first envelope there, on the verge, because curiosity is a thin, sharp thing. The letter inside was short, folded 3 times, edges damp but intact. I won't read names or addresses. I won't turn this into a case file for strangers to ogle. But the text began with a quiet, ordinary sentence, an affirmation of love, a small apology, a promise that the writer would visit. Postmark, a town 3 counties over. Date, stamped nearly a decade after the letter was written. Mara's first thought was practical. Maybe it misrouted. Maybe someone had collected old mail and attempted delivery. Maybe the stamp machine at a sorting center had been misset. She told herself it was bureaucratic misfortune. But then she found another envelope, and another, and the pattern pushed at her like a tide.
More envelopes, arranged like a small accidental archive. Different paper textures, different inks, different handwriting, some neat, some trembling. The postmarks didn't line up the way normal postmarks do. Dates jumped forward. Towns appeared that no longer used those processing centers. A handful of names matched entries in cold case files, files that listed people as missing years ago. Mara cross-checked in her head, then on her phone. Local obituaries, municipal records, a form for old postmark collectors. The rational explanations multiplied: missed delivery, delayed bulk mail, family members clearing estates. But the coincidences hovered. The letters seemed less like trash and more like something returned by the forest itself. Can you hear it? The pattern settled into her like a second heartbeat.
I wanted answers, so I did what any careful narrator does. I asked experts. Not because experts are oracles, but because they provide limits. What we can know, what we should not assume. The first voice that helped map the territory was a postal historian I spoke with over a rain-blurred call. She explained how mail routes shift, how sorting centers consolidate, and how bulk mail can be delayed for months, or, in rare bureaucratic errors, years. Machines misread barcodes, bundles go into storage, and records sometimes fail to reconcile. She said, with a journalist's patience, paper keeps a stubborn memory. But she also cautioned, postmarks can be reapplied during reprocessing. A date on a stamp is a clue,
not a verdict. Then I sat with a forensic document examiner in a lab that smelled faintly of solvents and coffee. Under magnification, paper reveals its life. Fibers swell, inks migrate, adhesives darken and crack. The examiner handled samples I provided, photographs and sealed images, and described how aging can be accelerated or slowed by storage conditions, damp basements, dry attics, sealed boxes. He said very simply that a letter doesn't always age uniformly. The way glue flakes can tell you if a seal was opened and resealed, the way a crease pattern betrays repeated handling. His caution was clinical and humane. You can test for age, you can estimate, but you cannot conjure intent from fiber alone.
A sociologist I spoke with, someone whose work traces how people make relics of grief, offered a different frame. She talked about letter sending as ritual, messages offered to the air, to strangers, to the past. People write into absence to create continuity. They address envelopes to places that no longer exist to keep something bound to memory. She used a phrase that stayed with me: communication as a tether. That idea began to change the case from a puzzle to an ethical question. What do we do with someone else's tether when the wild returns it to us? Who owns the grief that leaves footprints on paper?
And here is where the path narrows. Mara faced a choice that feels, at first, almost petty. Post the images on a local message board and ask if anyone recognized handwriting, hand the letters to police, turn them over to the postal service, tuck them away in a safe place. Each option carried consequences. Posting images could spread personal grief into public curiosity. Handing them to police might trigger an investigation, but also reopen wounds for families. Keeping them could be called obstruction. She weighed the law. There are statutes against tampering with mailed items, and the human thing. What if a family had been waiting for a sign? This was not a puzzle for a single evening. This was a moral knot. This is where things change.
I followed the thread of postmarks like a trail of breadcrumbs, not to claim final answers, but to show how evidence moves. The postmarks traced an odd route: rural sorting centers that had been decommissioned, a private contractor that handled bulk undelivered mail, and one small archival facility that, according to records, stored returned mail during a transition period. Walking through that facility, fluorescent hum overhead, rows of metal shelves, felt like entering a library of absences. There was a tension between the cold, bureaucratic movement of paper and the warmth of what those letters contained. Birthdays missed, promises unkept, names whispered into folded sheets. At one point, a clerk pulled a carton labeled unclaimed, and inside, unassuming, was a bundle with the same peculiar grouping of postmarks. The air seemed to hold its breath. The choices Mara made now tightened. Alert authorities, consult next of kin, or let the letters sleep. The fear takes hold.
What followed was slow and precise. Mara contacted the local postal inspector and a detective familiar with cold cases. They advised against publicizing images. Legal and ethical reasons are clear. Opening or distributing private mail is a crime in many jurisdictions, and it can further traumatize families. Instead, they recommended documenting chain of custody, photographs kept sealed, names anonymized, and official handoff to authorities. That approach honored both the possibility of these letters being evidence and the privacy of those to whom they were addressed. Families were contacted through official channels when appropriate, and some came forward with stories of letters they remembered writing or never receiving. Others asked for privacy. The community argued gently and loudly in local meetings about what to do with artifacts the woods had returned. The debate felt like a mirror thrown up to the town's sense of care and curiosity. In the weeks after, the postbox at the trailhead became a quiet monument. A few people drove out at dusk to stand by the shoulder and listen to cars pass. Others left small tokens, fresh flowers, a pressed leaf, on the stone that marked the entrance. One envelope, still sealed, was returned to the box. The handwriting on it was unfamiliar, younger, the ink blue and hopeful. Someone had written a new name across the outer flap and slid it back in, as if the road itself were a mailbox for the living and the dead. No one opened it. No one had to. The ambiguity was its own kind of answer. The night remembers.
Before we close, a few things I must say plainly, because stories like this can lead us into dangerous curiosity. If you ever find mail that looks old, personal, or possibly connected to a missing person case, do not photograph or post it online. Do not open it. Document where you found it. Protect it from the elements if possible, and contact your local postal authority or the police. They will advise next steps and preserve chain of custody. In this episode's show notes, I list steps and resources. We owe the people behind those envelopes respect, not spectacle. Pay attention to the details.
A final image. Mara walked back to the trailhead at dawn. The road steamed. The lid of the postbox lay open like a small, dark mouth. Inside, alongside the envelopes already collected by officials, sat a new single envelope, face up. It had no address, only a name written in a hurried hand. She stood there and felt, what? A chill, sure, but also a peculiar tenderness. Some things returned to us are not evidence to be solved, but reminders that people keep speaking to what they have lost. Sometimes the forest gives, and sometimes it keeps its own secrets. And sometimes, decades later, someone finds both. This is the moment to be gentle with the story. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who listens in the dark. Subscribe to Nature's Dread so we can keep bringing these quiet edge stories into a room with light. In the show notes, you'll find a short guide, what to do if you find old mail, contacts for postal inspectors, and resources if you've been affected by missing person cases. Thank you for bearing witness with me. Are you still with me? Until next time, check the corners. I'm Sam Nang.